What's up? What's up? What's up, everybody? We're going to be starting, for those watching the playback, fast forward like 3 minutes, fast forward 3 or 4 minutes before, as we let everybody come in. Whew. All right. So I hope that y'all are good. We're going to just give everybody a few minutes to jump in. Okay. Again, watching the playback, fast forward like a good 3 minutes before we get started. Okay. What's up? What's up? What's up, ladies? All right. I hope y'all have been enjoying y'all day, all that good stuff. It is Thursday. It's almost the weekend. All right. So we're going to get started in, what time is it? It's 8:02. We're going to get started at 8:04. We're going to get started at 8:04. So we're going to get started in 2 minutes. All right. So I guess while we're waiting for everybody to come in, we'll go over like a quick little recap. So for those who have seen the first part of this history of Quimbanda, we have already gone over the history as far as how we have ended up in Brazil. Okay, so we went over the history of the slave trade, as far as the types of people that were brought over from the continent of Africa, starting off with the Bantu people and people focused in the tribes of the Bantu and focusing more on Central and Southern Africa. And then we started coming in during like those last 200 years from 1700 to 1900 to the Yoruba people. Okay. So we already went through that in part 1. If you don't know what I'm talking about, go back and watch part 1. All right. If you're watching the replay of this and this is your first time seeing this, go back and watch part 1. So now when I jump into everything, it is all synchronizing and making sense. Okay. All right. So, all right. We're about to get started. Okay. So, so the last thing that we covered in class was from 1700 to 1900. Excuse me. And we spoke about how the Yoruba people started coming in to Brazil, via the slave trade, as things rerouted from the countryside, or things migrated from the countryside to the city, and the more slender biotypes, and how they brought in a lot of cultural knowledge as well as spirituality from the different parts of Africa. So at this point in time, one second, take a swig of water. So at this point in time, now we have slavery that is starting to come to an end in Brazil. And what is happening now is when the Yoruba people come, okay, although there are cultural differences that we discussed before in the last class, what is happening now is, again, we're starting to create a melting pot. So we're looking for similarities, okay, or they're looking for similarities of what they practice, similarities in the different practices that they have of spirituality, to form new practices, to form new cults of practice. Okay, so we have 4 major types of spirituality that begins happening around this time. Okay, and this is, now we're in 1900. So we're going from like 1900 to around 1950. Okay, so 4 major types of spirituality that's happening is, first you have the indigenous practice. First you have the indigenous practice of Brazilian shamanism. Okay, so again, that's dealing with shamanism, that's dealing with the indigenous sorcery, nature forces, etc. So we have that. Okay, now we also have Kalundu, which is going to be later known which is going to be later known as Candomblé. Okay, so what Kalundu is, okay, as it was known in the countryside, was that deals with nature forces. Okay, so that is stemming in the practice of a mix of orishas, of Nkisi, and it is also stemming from Vodun. Okay, so that right there is going to make up Kalundu, right, which was mainly in the countryside, and as we began to migrate into the cities, this is when it starts to become known more as Candomblé. Okay, so you have that practice. Okay, then you have French Kardecist. Okay, so now with French Kardecist, that is going into European spirits, European magic, and that is also a practice that is happening at the time in Brazil. And then the fourth kind of spirituality that you're seeing in Brazil is going to be Macumba, which is going to be a mix of all of those traditions in one. All right. So those are the four major types of practices that are going on in Brazil during this time, during the 1900s. Okay. You have the French Kardecist, you have Brazilian shamanism, or the indigenous practice of the land. Okay, you have Kalundu, or what is now known as Candomblé, and you have Macumba. All right. So before I go any further, does that make sense? Or put a 1 if that makes sense. Okay. All right, cool. So now, all right. So now you have those four major players, we'll say, in Brazil at the time. All right. So now from there, we have in 1908, we have what then becomes the Umbanda Foundation. So now what happens is in a French Kardecist ceremony, we have a medium. Okay, we have a medium, so that's someone who is a vessel for a spirit or energy to come through. And there was a native spirit or an indigenous spirit that came through. And because they were native and indigenous and they were not a European spirit, all right, they were rejected out of the ceremony. They were told that they didn't want to be there, or they were told not to be there. Okay. So what would happen is that native spirit, okay, as from the medium, then proclaimed okay, boom, there will be a new practice. Because with the French, with that practice, they considered anyone who was not in that practice, any spirits that were not European, they considered them to be evil. They considered them to be low-level spirits, low-ranking spirits, spirits that were beneath them. So any spirit that would try to come through that was not considered, like a European spirit was completely rejected. So from that, in 1908, you have the formation of Umbanda. So now what does Umbanda focus on? Okay. At the time, Umbanda focused on the indigenous spirits of Brazil. Okay. They focused on certain African spirits, but mainly the indigenous spirits of Brazil, just being real with y'all. And they also focused on children's spirits. Okay. They focused on children's spirits, and they focused on this concept of love, charity, peace. Okay, so now with the formation of Umbanda, you now have four major players, okay, which now is, instead of it just being called Brazilian shamanism, Now you have Umbanda, which focuses on the indigenous spirits of Brazil, which focuses on certain African spirits of Brazil, or ancient African spirits, and which focuses on children. All right. Or children, childlike energies that come through. And again, their philosophy is peace, love, charity work. Okay. So when Umbanda happens, right? Because we've already established that the French, or French Kardechism, they basically shun anyone who is not within their realm. Okay, anyone who is not in the European spirit. So any of these spirits are getting shunned by them. Okay, when Umbanda forms, so it starts to become a little bit more complex, because while, this is why I say they had certain African energies that they would recognize, but for the most part, it was more focused on indigenous practice, indigenous spirits. Okay, and that was because you have to remember the time frame. We're talking about 1908, early 1900s. So there is still a lot of racism. There's still a lot of prejudice, even within these spiritual practices. So what some historians will say is that there would be a whitewashing of Umbanda, okay, because they wanted to be seen as, they wanted to be like compared to some of the white spiritual practices, or the whitewashed religions. So they would not acknowledge a lot of the African, a lot of the African spirits, a lot of the major African spirits. They would shun, practices like Kalundu or like Candomblé. All right, where you would have more of a focus on the Nkisi, more of a focus on Orisha, more of a focus on Vodun. Okay, and again, reminder, if you don't know what Nkisi is, again, check out part 1 so that you can refresh yourself, or check out the glossary that will be up by the end of the week in the Discord chat. All right, so you have Umbanda at the time. Okay, and again, the umbrella now is you have French Kardechism, which shuns everybody, right? They like basically fuck everybody, right? if you're not one of us, fuck y'all, basically. Then under them, right, which is kind of like in the middle, you have Umbanda, right? Which, we then would oppose, a lot of early Umbanda temples would oppose more of the African influence of the religion, all right, which would include, like I said, Candomblé. And then under Umbanda, you have Candomblé. And or Kalundu, right? And they took in, again, they were more of a focus on the African aspects that were migrated over to Brazil, okay, from the Bantu and the Yoruba people. Okay, so now you have those three, and now under all of that, you still have Macumba. So Macumba is basically a non-organized practice. So Macumba would combine the practices of the French Kardechism, of Umbanda, of Candomblé, and in any type of European magic, folklore, whatever. Okay, with Macumba, it doesn't matter what the practice is. Macumba was just focused on magic. Okay, so there's no religious backing or politics in Macumba. Macumba focused on magic. It did not matter where the magic was from as far as the practice. It did not matter, your belief system. If there was a spirit coming in, they didn't concern themselves with if it was a low-ranking spirit, a high-ranking spirit. honorable ancestor. They did not concern themselves with any of that. The only thing that the practitioners of Macumba cared about was magic and if the magic worked. Okay? So you have Macumba, which is they don't care about any of the extra stuff. They don't care about any of the politics. They just want to get to magic and what works for them. Okay? And then you have Umbanda, which focused on Orisha, which focused on Nkisi and Vodun. You have I'm sorry, I said that was Umbanda. You have that's Candomblé, okay? So then above that you have Umbanda, which was mainly the Brazilian indigenous spirits and the and childlike spirits, okay? And then of course the French. So nice little umbrella or pyramid, you will say, as far as the layering, I guess, for lack of a better phrase, of how we really reach Macumba. Okay, so with Macumba, although as I broke down in all of the different practices or religions, they were opposed to certain aspects under each other, which was what they considered under each other. Right? You have everybody opposing Macumba. Okay, so that's the other aspect. Everyone opposed Macumba. Everyone looked at Macumba as black magic, as evil, as low level, low ranking, in a modern term or modern day language, low vibrational. Everyone looked at Macumba like this. Okay, so Macumba was ostracized by these practices. And if they knew that you practiced Macumba, obviously you were ostracized as well. All right. So you have to remember the time period, because the thing with Macumba is Macumba was all about taking in, and again later in Umbanda, but Macumba was really all about taking in marginalized people. Okay, marginalized people that did not have any way of spiritual practice, that were shunned by all of these other practices because they did not fit into the societal archetype of what those practices expected or what they wanted. And they basically said, F all that, I'm just going to, I just want to do magic. I don't want to get into the politics. I don't want to get into the extra stuff. I just want to practice magic that works. And I don't give a damn where it comes from or who considers it to be bad. Okay. So of all of these practices, Macumba was the one that was really, really non-judgmental. Okay. Really non-judgmental, really just embracing of all. Okay. Yes. Before, does that make sense for everybody? Y'all can put y'all can put yeah, y'all can put a one, whatever. I just want to make sure that that makes sense because I said a whole lot in a pretty short time span. All right. So yeah, a lot of the earlier practices were, again, very whitewashed. Okay. And it's not saying that they didn't have positive aspects, right? As far because again, Umbanda now does embrace a lot of its African roots and culture, and again in Candomblé as well, right? But it's not to say that it's not to speak negatively on those practices as a whole. Okay, but you have a lot of priests that were at the time, really condemning these spirits that would come through that did not fit into the whitewashing of what they wanted. Because the thing is that these practices wanted acceptance. Okay, a lot of the practitioners, a lot of the priests of those practices wanted to have acceptance because of the disparity that they were living in. Okay, so instead of it kind of being like, okay, you have this practice and you are just standing 10 toes down on what it is and what you practice, it was more so of, we want to practice this, but we want acceptance. So there was kind of like, just this way of, again, whitewashing is the best way that I can put it, or trying to be seen as less of a threat. Okay, because they felt that if they were seen as less of a threat, that they would be able to one, just practice more freely, but also they felt that maybe it will make their circumstances better, you know. So Macumba was seen as, again, evil. Macumba was seen as again, low level, like just the scum, bottom of the earth, like just all of that, and the people that practice Macumba, just for lack of a better phrase, they just didn't give a fuck. You know what I'm saying? They just didn't care. They didn't care about fitting in. They didn't care about trying to appeal to society and society standards. They didn't care about any of that. They didn't care about, all right, what if we try to, just get acceptance from, these colonizers, European people, etc. Because although slavery is officially or legally over, we have to, keep in mind too, just because slavery was over doesn't mean that, Black people and indigenous people there, that they like somehow mysteriously came into some wealth or just lived good lives after that. No, they were still living in hell pretty much. So those people that were living in hell, they said, fuck it, I'm gonna make hell my home. And instead of me living in hell, I'm gonna run hell, and that was just the whole premise and concept of Macumba. All right. And the reason why I wanted to kind of like focus more so on that, so y'all can understand what that is because Macumba is the predecessor to Quimbanda. All right. Quimbanda is Macumba, is modern day Macumba. Okay. So I wanted y'all to understand that foundation before we jump into now. All right, boom. Quimbanda is coming into play. All right. And we had the official formation of Quimbanda in 1952 or 1962? 1962. Okay. And we have now the organization and the structure to really come together and help those that are marginalized, okay, and that don't feel that there is, any other way. All right, so I'm stopping right here because we're gonna do maybe one more part, maybe one more part to this, because I ain't trying to make this a Jackson mini series. All right, so we're going to do one more part, and then we're going to discuss basically the official formation and organization of Quimbanda, and bring it up to what it is modern day Quimbanda. All right. If you have any questions, okay, put it in the intro to Quimbanda chat. Let me know what you think about tonight's class in the Discord chat. And is there anything else that I want to say before I jump off of here? I'm trying to think fast. I think that's it, y'all. I think that's it. Yeah, drop y'all thoughts in the chat. I definitely want to know y'all thoughts. Okay, y'all want me to continue with this and what you took from this. Okay, and we're going to finish up part 3 on Monday. All right. So yes, that's it. Yeah, if you haven't subscribed to the channel, subscribe. I'm going to be posting updates on this page as well. For classes, I'll do YouTube posts so y'all can see when classes are, just in case y'all are not in the Discord, and you can't see it or whatever. Y'all will know what's happening. And yeah, I'm hyped. Peace.